my name is Zach, and we were talking today in class about Odysseus and Ender being foils. And I wanted to know
what?
about Odysseus and Ender being foils.
Okay, now that's why I'm not hearing that last word, being what? Spell it.
Opposites.
Opposites. Okay, okay.
And someone said that there was a point where Ender was so low that he contemplated suicide, or it implied suicide. Was there ever a point?
Boy, maybe I used language to imply that. I had him thinking of leaving battle school, giving up on the game, of dropping out. Maybe though, I don't reread the book a lot. So maybe there's a passage that leaves a clear implication like that, but I don't have any memory of ever having him think of killing himself. He might have had a point where he would welcome release however it came, that if he were to drop dead tomorrow, he wouldn't be sad. That's not the same thing as contemplating suicide. But if it's there, it's there. You know, I'm not going to pretend that I have the text memorized, but I don't remember that as ever being my intent. But in terms of Odysseus, if you found ways to make them an interesting opposite somehow, I think that's cool, but you have to remember that the Iliad and the Odyssey are not at all important to me in my fiction, and the idea that I would have ever intended that should be shunned. That doesn't mean that it's not useful for you guys to look at it that way, because all of literature is available to you. Certainly I was aware of those things. But each of them represents a type. Ender's Game represents a type. I'm not hardly the first one to do a Bildungsroman. There's a lot of those. But I had very different models. If you look at who was important to me, the writers who I would be using as sources and things to argue against, Homer doesn't even make the list. We don't live in that era now. We don't live in the era when everybody reads Greek going through school and has to translate the Iliad and the Odyssey in order to get through 7th grade. We live in a different time now. And so the works that were here are very different.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Mr. Card. I'm Tyler, and I'm a gathering writer, and I was actually wondering if you have any advice.
And you said you're a what? I just didn't hear the word.
I like to write.
Okay.
And so in your intro, you write that the important thing you learn about the writing process is, and I quote, the necessity of being harsh with your own material, of emphasizing or rewriting something that is not work. Now, when I was writing a short story, I put in as much emotion and as much details as I could, and then in order to be able to use it, I had to take out a lot of information from that. That's one thing I learned from you, but I want to know if there's any other advice you could give me to help me with my work.
Okay, well, for one thing, as soon as you say you put in a lot of emotion, that always makes me inwardly cringe. I'm not sure what you mean by that. There's some ways that you could use that would be good. But by and large, any emotion you write into the story, the reader will not feel. The way you actually create emotion in the reader is to put your characters through situations where emotions would naturally be felt, and then you don't have to feel it. The reader will feel it for the character. It's one of the cheap tricks that playwrights do and movie people do is they put a child on the screen and make the child cry. Hey, Joel, and then it cries and whatever, and so then we have an automatic empathy response to children. Crying children make us emotionally involved. If we didn't have that, we would have given up on reproducing long ago, because children are so annoying that if they didn't have ways to make us feel pity, we'd abandon them all very quickly. The night crying, they don't even last the first year if we don't also think they're very cute. But with your adult characters, if they cry, you've spent the emotion, it's gone. Reader doesn't have to feel it. But if they don't cry, then the reader has to supply the emotion. So, for what it's worth, cheap trick, you don't show the emotion. You never write the emotion. You just put them through the ringer and then let the reader feel it. That's one. Second thing, though, is as soon as you say rewrite, we have to make sure we're talking about the same thing. I've heard teachers say it's all in the... No, it's not. There's only one living draft of fiction, and that is the first draft. So when I say I rewrite, that doesn't mean I go in and fiddle, that I take a paragraph and recast it, that I'll rewrite a sentence. that's just killing the story. You'll end up with a dead manuscript then. What I do is, I look at it and I say, what shouldn't have happened? Which scenes shouldn't I have shown? And I'll take it from the place where I wrote the story, and I will throw out everything else. And I mean, I will never look at it again, as long as I live. I will never try to pull out anything from it. I will not use anything from it. And from the point where I make that change, then I write it new as a new first draft. So it's a first draft. It's a living draft. But now different stuff happens. And I'll introduce a new character, or I'll include scenes that I had skipped over. I may include scenes that I had included before, but I'll write them differently, because once I've changed something in chapter 3, not a word of chapter 4 from the previous draft will be used. Not a word of it. Because I'll now know more things, the character will know more things, the viewpoint characters will have different experiences, the reader will have experienced different things. And so I have to write it again from the beginning. So in one sense, absolutely, you have to be ruthless with your own work. You have to be able to throw out, I've thrown out hundreds of pages. I've thrown out entire drafts and started over. If you can't do that, you've got no future as a writer. But I also have watched friends of mine fiddle and fiddle and fiddle with, quote, rewrites, unquote, which are really just pathetic editing. And absolutely kill what was once a hybrid. That kind of rewrite, just don't do it. Don't waste your time. That's why I gave writing the advice. The only time you ever rewrite is if the editor asks you. And I will add that, that's only if you agree with it. So speaking to those of you who want to read fiction and have it published, just remember that the way that it flows out of your head the first time is the way that it would flow if you were sitting around a campfire telling it to people. But the more you fiddle with it, the more it becomes killed, the more it becomes pre-digested. You're not improving. Obviously, big typos, places it's unclear that you'll do fixes there, but you'll never rewrite it just to more elegant writing. Does that make sense? I hope that was helpful.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for how we're going from, just tough. Okay.
Is that how you wrote Ender's Game?
And I didn't have to throw out anything. Flowed very easily. But you got to remember, I had written short story. But this occasion, I had already written the story. I went back and added 2/3 of the novel before the short story's beginning. But I had never tried to use anything from the short story except to send remember the enemy's gaze down. That was it. And even when I was writing Ender's Shadow, I had no qualms at all about contradicting Ender's Game, because it no longer fit. And someday I may do a reconciliation edition of Ender's Game. I revise it to fit what I did in Ender in Exile and Ender's Shadow. But I learned stuff about it, and I things about the characters by the time we got to scenes that overlapped. So why would I keep it the same? So you have to be ruthless with your own stuff, even already.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Shoshana Rich. So I have a question, but I also want to say that it was really interesting. The first time I picked up the book in middle school, I hated it. I couldn't get back half the first page, and for a few years I thought I hated sci-fi. Then I read it in school in this year, and I literally fell in love. It was really interesting.
Well, I'm glad that you gave it a second try. But you gotta remember that I'm with you on the first choice too. If you read a page and you don't connect and you don't care, you don't have any duty to read it.
So I'm glad I picked it up again, though.
I'm glad you did.
I really liked it. But something that really struck me was how in the beginning of Ender's Game, even in the first